Good afternoon, Advocate Grunya.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Minister. I'm well, and yourself?
I'm okay.
Good. Just
I'll
give
allow
me
you
my-
to settle.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm settled, I think.
Okay.
As settled as I'm ever going to be.
Okay. No, don't be nervous. Just be relaxed. You've got your questionnaire with you.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
please.
Thank you. We're going to start with the questionnaire. I'll take you through the questionnaire, and then, together with panel members, we'll ask you questions, and then we'll take you to the section that deals with the comments. You would have sent you the public comments that we've received about your work and you. And then let me just check who is going to lead that section so that I don't have to come back. Okay. It's Advocate Spania who's going to lead on the questionnaire for you when we come to that section.
Excellent. Minister, I don't have a copy of the responses that I have it on email, but I don't have a hard copy. I received.
Would you like the hard copy?
I would.
Okay, the Secretariat will make that hard copy for you while we deal with the others. Thanks for flagging that. We'll be making that copy for you so that it's easier. But if you want to open your laptop, you're allowed to.
Thank you, Minister.
So that you can get the
It's
information.
my safety blanket, so I'll keep it here.
You are, yeah, myself as well. I battle with papers, so that's why sometimes I go to my gadget. We'll go through section 1. It's your personal information that is confirmed.
Yes.
And then we go to your qualifications. If you can take us through how these qualifications are important for this position and how they are relevant for the position of the NDPP. And you can keep your mic on. It will not disrupt us, so don't worry about switching it off. Otherwise, you'll forget to switch it on again. So you can keep it at, we will switch ours as we speak.
I'll apologize in advance because my glasses are for reading here, but when I'm looking at you, I have to take them off, so they get very annoying. So you want me to take you through my qualifications. I did an undergraduate Bachelor of Arts degree at the University of Cape Town from 1990 to 1993. I actually took a year longer than I was meant to, because I was SRC president in 92, 93, and politics was quite intense at the time, and my academics suffered a bit. In fact, Latin in particular proved to be a challenge. So I was meant to do a 5-year BA LLB, the accelerated one, but it wasn't compatible with being a student activist and being SRC president. So then, actually between my undergraduate degree and my LLB, I was selected to participate in a diplomatic training program. It was a project to skill up young professionals to take up positions in government. And my majors in my undergrad were in politics and in English. And in politics, I was asked if I wanted to apply for this program. The first part of the program was run out of UWC. And then if you qualified to the second round, you went to New York and Washington, D.C. for the second part of the program. So I did that. I did both parts. And so I have a certificate in diplomatic training. And it's a certificate I'm very proud of, but I suppose has come to define my character. But they described me as a little unnecessarily contentious, because I think in a meeting with Hillary Clinton, I asked what they considered a very undiplomatic question. I knew then probably a career in diplomacy is not really for me. So I came back and did my LLB, which I finished in 1996. But I still wasn't sure what career I wanted to do. You know, you grow up, I grew up in a township called Atlantis, and your options were doctor or lawyer. If you had, actually, the option was machinist, because all the people in my family worked for clothing factories as machinists. So I was terrified that that is going to be my fate, because I didn't consider myself very good at sewing or knitting or anything to do with making clothes. So, but I remember failing Latin in university and saying to my grandmother, yeah, so I don't know about this law degree, whether it's actually going to happen. And she said to me, don't worry, you can always switch to medicine. And indicating that there weren't very many people who had any idea what it is that I was doing there at university. But I thought, I mean, I was going to be a lawyer because that's what everybody told me. If you have a big mouth and you're outspoken and you debate, then obviously you're going to be a lawyer. But arriving at university and seeing all these options, I thought I should pause and just give it more thought. So I didn't apply for articles straight away. I went, because it was an exciting time in the country, you know, the Constitution had just been adopted and Parliament was in the process of passing laws that was going to reshape the country and lay the foundations for the new democracy. So it was a really exciting time to be there. I was appointed as a researcher to the Select Committee. I think I've moved on from my qualifications because my next degree comes 10 years later. I have a master's in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School. And there too, I had to decide, am I doing a master's in law or am I doing a master's in public administration? And having ended up in the prosecution almost entirely by accident, because I was working for Bulelani Ngcuka in Parliament, he becomes the first national director. I end up in the National Prosecuting Authority. After 10 years, I thought, again, you need to think about this. Is this the career you really want to do? And at the time, I mean, I was in the public service and interested in management, and I thought, let me give this a try. So I applied for this master's program, and I graduated a year later. I spent a year in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So that is my professional qualifications.
I thought you linked it for us in terms of the work in the NPA, but let's get to the history of your work. I think as you respond, you'll be able to do that.
Yes.
I'm going to start where you just left off at the Select Committee in Parliament. So you were in the Select Committee 1997 to 98 as a researcher. And then you moved, and thanks for the detailed and explanation of what this position is about. I think it's quite helpful. In a number of areas you've gone in detail to explain, especially in areas where it's not within even the country. So August 98 to 99, professional assistant to the Director of Public Prosecution.
The first National Director of Public Prosecution. So I was one of about 4 staff members. Okay. So the NPA you see in the VGM building now started out with us looking for chairs to sit on because the commencement of the office was announced with the appointment of the National Director, and that was it.
Okay.
And we
had to we'll get into that in terms of your experience as well. And then 1999 to 2000, Junior State Advocate, and then 2000 to 2003, Senior State Advocate. And then you moved March 2003 to 2012, AFU, Regional Head. I see here this is the period you were able to take a sabbatical leave to do your master's at Harvard. And then December 2012 to 2018, advocate in private practice and a member of the Cape Bar. And then you moved in that National Prosecuting Head, Investigating Directorate, 2019 and until 2022. Okay, we'll come to that. Open Secrets NGO, part-time head of legal unit, 2021 to 2022. This was consulting.
Yes.
Okay.
I was also consulting outside of Open Secrets.
So it was multiple consulting process. Okay, that's understood. And then part-time legal researcher for the DGRU, the Democratic Governance and Rights Units in the University of Cape Town. You are contracted there currently?
Again, part-time, and I consult to the World Bank, UNODC, and STAR.
Yes.
Yeah.
UN Anti-Corruption Law Enforcement Global Network, also 2023 to 2024.
So with my short-term contracts, that's what the official term in the UN system and the World Bank system, these are called, and they go from year to year, and there's 30 days for this particular project, 100 days for that project. So none of them were full-time. They were all part-time, short-term contracts. Yes.
I think, what we're looking for as well is what has been the work there, and I think you've done as well to assist us. But we're trying to ensure that it's also on record in terms of anti-corruption specialists and strategic work, and we'll get into that because it's within what we also, I think there's a link with our work, that's UNCAC as well. And then it goes into European Union anti-corruption initiatives that you've done. It's also as a contract.
Yes.
There, okay. And then this one is the Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative with UNODC as a partner, but also being able to work with NACAC.
Yes.
In the anti-corruption, national anti-corruption institutional architecture proposals that we have. That's between 2013, 2018, but also currently. So it's in phases as well.
Yes.
Okay. And then currently you are freelancing as an international anti-corruption and asset recovery specialist. Just take us through your journey in terms of professional, because I don't think I'll do justice in what I'm doing here. I'm looking at quite a number of issues. I see here you've also done some research in terms of accountability in terms of the state capture accountability projects involving PRASA and Transnet. Maybe take us through that process of your work that you feel is also important. I've selected what I saw is as critical for me to ask questions. And I think I'm being fair because you've written down, and if I am to read everything for the record, but perhaps let me give you an opportunity to go through it.
So I overcompensated. I will try to be brief.
Actually, to be honest, it's far better because if you don't have much information, then we deal on one issue that we don't move on, whereas it doesn't allow us to get into the real critical issues.
I think because I'm in private practice and I have to advertise and market myself to get projects, I have to be able to demonstrate what I've done for people to risk reappointing me to do further work. So that's why I have a CV that captures what I've done over the years. So I do want to briefly start with the very beginning, the setting up of the National Prosecuting Authority, maybe even before, with a year in Parliament where I first, I think, got interested in issues of criminal justice, because we were looking at the National Prosecuting Authority Act was before Parliament at the time, the proceeds, the POCA, Prevention of Organized Crime Act, the International Cooperation in Criminal Matters Act, so the ICMA. These were all laws that I was doing research for members of Parliament on and looking at comparative studies around the world. So I think that's how I became interested in these issues. So when entirely fortuitously, the chair of the select committee and my boss at the time, Bulelani Ngcuka, was appointed the first national director of public prosecutions, he asked me if I would join him as sort of a personal assistant for want of any other title, because there was no organizational structure, there was nothing. There was basically, we're going to go there and we're going to start this thing from scratch. I think he also brought his secretary from Parliament. He brought Sipho Ngwema, who became the spokesperson for the NPA. And we were the people who started the process of establishing a structure that came off the ground very quickly and developed very quickly. But what it gave me was an incredibly privileged vantage point, watching, firstly, Bulelani Ngcuka as a leader in a very complex environment, because he had all these former attorneys general who were practically, frankly, hostile. And he had to win them over, at the same time set a tone and an agenda that spoke to change, that spoke to how we are going to do things very differently in the NPA going forward. And I think it is a responsibility he acquitted himself of fairly effectively, I would say. I had many criticisms, and he would be the first to tell people how freely and openly I would criticize him. But I think, stepping back, he had a unique set of skills for that moment and that time. He had to set up this national office. There was a compromise, basically, at the Constitutional Assembly, because before 1998, the attorneys general were basically laws unto themselves in their divisions. They only answered to the Minister of Justice and under apartheid. And so for them to now account to and report to a boss was new and in their view, mostly problematic, because they feared political interference. They feared that they would be directed by a political head in terms of who they should prosecute and who not. On the other hand, the things needed to change. The prosecution before 1994 was a very different project to the one that we wanted to create under the Constitution. There was now a Constitution that had to be implemented and complied with. So these were very tricky and difficult decisions. But the compromise reached is that the national director would have the role of setting policy, of almost being the bridge between the minister and the executive authority and the professionals in the prosecution. So the idea was not that the NDPP would exercise original prosecutorial discretion. That was reserved for the DPPs. They were then given the continued authority to institute and stop prosecutions, whereas the national director could only act through policies and directives, in, making sort of through directives rather than through direct management of those people. I enjoyed very much working with Bulelani, but I also thought, if I'm going to become national director myself one day, I'm going to actually have to get some legal experience and get myself properly qualified and practice. So, shortly after the establishment of the Scorpions, the establishment of the the asset forfeiture unit, which again started with Willie Hofmeyer, myself, and a colleague, Lungisa Diosi, built up an institution that 10 years later I was very proud of. And I think you asked me to point out a highlight in my career, and I think what we did in the asset forfeiture unit in the first 10 years was extraordinary, and it's less recognized here at home. It's much more appreciated out in the rest of the world because, you know, almost 60% of the work I get is off the reputation of the South African Asset Forfeiture Unit, of the jurisprudence, the body of jurisprudence that we had developed over the first 10 years. The asset forfeiture unit in South Africa is still recognized as one of the leading asset forfeiture units in the world. So I joined the asset forfeiture unit, and I had to make some career decisions because while I was in the National Director's office, I was studying part-time. I wrote my 4 attorneys admission exams, and I passed them. And I was left to do a 6-month, I also did the School for Legal Practice for 6 months, and so I was left with 6 months in articles. And I said to Bulelani, I think I need to go do these 6 months, otherwise I'm never going to do them. But then really persuaded me that this is an exciting opportunity. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to start something from scratch, something so novel, and something you can shape and impact on, that eventually I was persuaded. And so I spent the next 10 years doing that. And I say 10 years because right in the beginning, we had colleagues from other parts of the world come and talk to us about implementing an asset forfeiture unit and an asset forfeiture strategy. And there were all these people who said, oh, I've been doing this for 10 years, 15 years. And I just looked at them thinking, I want to be able to say that I have 10 years of experience in this thing. So when my 10 years came, I was also confronted with an NPA that was looking less and less like the one we started building under Bulelani. And there, you know, in 2010, I had come to the point where I was also exhausted. I'd been working very hard and under very stressful conditions, and I thought, maybe I just need a break. Again, really persuaded me that instead of taking a break, maybe I should take a year sabbatical, apply, you know, study somewhere for a year, and then come back and continue the fight.
Maybe explain that. Was it conditions in the environment that got you exhausted?
Yes, it was very stressful being in the NPA in 2010, 2009, after the disbanding of the Scorpions. And you know, one of the ways in which I thought capture of the NPA took place was appointments into positions. In 2009, I was part of panels for junior state advocate positions in my office in Cape Town. And the NDPP, a deputy national director, and some senior deputies were on the panel for a junior state advocate position in asset forfeiture. That was unheard of. Yes.
It's a panel from National?
Yes. I was included in the panel, but it primarily consisted of an HR rep, but the national director. And I raised concerns about this, saying, okay, firstly, my immediate supervisor isn't even on this panel, but it's unusual for someone of that level to be on a panel. But the national director is the ultimate appointing authority, so it didn't seem appropriate for him to be in the panel. It was Advocate Simelane at the time. Yeah, so he was an acting NDPP, but nevertheless. and Advocate Jiba was also there. And I couldn't understand the purpose of this. But as the interviews unfolded, it was very clear to me that the purpose was to appoint people loyal to what they considered their faction and not people loyal to what they considered the other faction, which was the Willie Hofmeyr faction. And I remember thinking this is extraordinary because we were appointing people in asset forfeiture. We were developing people in asset forfeiture. It's a very unique skill in the NPA. So there were people who had developed experience and applied themselves, and they were ripe for appointment. They were not recommended in the end over my recommendation.
Sorry to interrupt. So majority were people would have been people from outside who got appointed then?
Yes, definitely. And I'm not averse to that because we were looking for people from outside because in the prosecution, there are not many prosecutors who have civil litigation skills and practice and experience. So we were looking for people from outside. And we were also looking for young black people. The reason ultimately given for some appointments was representation. But we only interviewed at that point black staff because the demographics in the organization were really very skewed. And so our project was to advance transformation. But the people who were selected were not suitable. And
so were not qualified?
They had, well, that's the issue I would love us to debate at length. What qualifies you as a prosecutor? For me, that is the most critical question facing the NPA today. What qualifies you as a prosecutor? I think then it was a basic 3-year legal degree. For a junior state advocate, you had to have, I think, between 3 and 5 years legal experience. That is also an extremely debatable term. So people qualified, but whether they were the most appropriate people and the best qualified people to occupy the positions, I didn't believe so. I wrote a memo afterwards raising all my concerns with the process and send it to...
Because you were the head of that.
I was the head of the asset forfeiture unit.
That you work with.
So this is the team I was going to now have to deliver on with. And it not only gave me people who would require a lot of training and a lot of support, but it also demoralized people who had worked really hard and thought that they had produced and thought that they had done what would be required of them to be appointed in those positions. So it was a real double whammy. And I thought, you know, there's not a lot I can do here, but I'm going to record my objections. I even sent it to the Department of Justice as well, because at the time we reported, and I wrote a memo saying, I think this is unlawful. It does not comply with the prescripts of the organization, of the public service, but I had no response. And I think that's a process that replicated itself in a number of areas. So appointments were made primarily on the basis of loyalty than on competence and skill and contribution, which I thought was a real danger for the organization. There were lots of other things happening at the time that, you know, if I had more energy, I certainly would have, you know, rolled up my sleeves and got into the fight. But I also was wondering if I shouldn't be, you know, qualifying myself as an advocate and seeing what a career outside of the public service looks like. Because in the public service, strangely, consultants and outside counsel are given a lot more respect and credibility than those of us who spent 10 years in the place developing the skill and the experience. But I thought I should go and have a look at what it is that they are supposed to have from doing that and see if it's fair, that assessment. So I did apply to Harvard, and I did get in. And while I was away, my staff in the Western Cape were working on, I had done the Shabir Sheikh case, the asset forfeiture part, with senior counsel, Advocate Wim Trengrove, and can't remember exactly who the other counsel was, but we did the legwork, and they added tremendous value. And one of the things I think Willie Hofmeyr was astute to realize early on is that you have to sell this law and to get this law implemented and effectively utilized, we needed good jurisprudence. And because it's novel, you needed people that are trusted and respected in the eyes of the judiciary to run these cases, which, was hard for us to swallow because we thought we deserved opportunities like that. And I think we had many fights with him about who, whether it's us or them, internal or external people. It's interesting that later on I had to confront those arguments again myself with the shoe on the other foot. So
we'll come back to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think in 2010, I would say, certainly was the beginning of capture of the NPA. And the primary tool was through appointments. Particularly, I would put my head on a block and say appointments in the Specialized Commercial Crimes Unit. And, the NPA left in 2011, and the NPA I returned to in 2019.
Your record says 2012 you left.
I left in 2011.
To go to Harvard.
I did pupillage at the bar.
Oh,
so I
okay.
didn't, so
okay.
the bar was kind enough. For my 10 years in the NPA, they recognized my experience, recognized 3 years of that as relevant experience.
Okay.
So I was on the same level as attorneys who had 3 years legal experience, whereas I had 10 years. But they gave me 3 months off pupillage, the year of pupillage as a credit for my experience. So I left the NPA in about March 2011 and finished my pupillage at the end of 2011. So I started my career at the bar, stroke my consulting career with STAR and UNODC in 2012, at the beginning of 2012. So yes, when I left the NPA, it was very hard because I felt the NPA head office, the office of the national director, I had been very involved in. I knew most of the people as the place was growing. In AFU, I was part of the management team for 10 years. And I could see that it was not going well. When I was at Harvard doing my degree, one of the cases my staff in Cape Town were working on involved a seizure of assets in Switzerland. The Swiss authorities had told us that relating to an arms deal case, we have a couple of $100 million, and our eyes were all very big because we had never done cases of that magnitude back then. And so my staff in the Cape Town office, I was at Harvard.
Was it not the first one, the first case of asset forfeiture externally?
Yes.
It was the first case.
It was the first case seizing assets in another jurisdiction, getting an order here, because we had to address the issue of jurisdiction and how can you get an order in South Africa in respect of money located in another jurisdiction. But we got a preservation order in that case. And my staff were all extremely proud, and I certainly was proud of them, because it was novel and big and impressive in so many ways. Only to learn that the defendant in that case had made representations to the acting national director. I don't know yet if he was appointed permanently by then, but Advocate Simalani had met with the defendants and had decided that he didn't see the underlying criminal activity, that we said this money was the proceeds of crime. And he instructed my staff to withdraw the application. And
Okay.
yeah.
Just on that, was it still at application or you'd won?
It was
still at application.
Application stage. So it was a civil forfeiture application. Yes. So you start with preservation, and then you have 90 days. You give notice to all interested parties, and then the NPA has 90 days to bring a forfeiture application.
And the representation was done directly at national?
Yes.
Yes. AFU would be?
Yes.
It was, okay.
Well,
because
so...
maybe just explain. With
yes.
others, representation, for example, it will be with the DPP,
yes.
not with the NDPP.
Yes. But
so
asset forfeiture is slightly different, because the national director is the person who is authorized to bring asset forfeiture applications in her own name. So even when we bring the applications in the DPP's office, we don't cite the DPP, we cite the NDPP, because that's what the Prevention of Organized Crime Act requires. But remember, I'm sitting in Massachusetts trying to do a degree. I'm also very pregnant. And my staff are saying to me, how is this possible?
What was the value? Do you still remember?
I don't, but we did. An affidavit was put into the Zondo Commission on the entire saga. It didn't really address it, though, unfortunately, because it didn't. I think it ran out of time to address issues relating to the NPA. But certainly the advocate who dealt with this matter did an excellent job in the affidavit of recording how this entire thing happened. And it's almost a lecture in state capture. And so, when these things were happening, my first reaction was, because I can be quite impulsive, I thought I should resign in protest, because this is unacceptable. For a court had decided we had made a case without going back to court and allowing the court to make the decision. We were told to withdraw, and in the end.
Maybe you're saying the court had made a decision? A
provisional decision. Yes, so we got an interim preservation order from the court, ex parte.
Yes.
So what should happen next is we give notice to all the interested parties. They can then set the matter down and say they either want to contest the preservation, or because we have 90 days from that day to file a forfeiture order, they can decide they will oppose forfeiture, because the standard of proof at forfeiture is balance of probabilities, whereas at preservation it's just reasonable suspicion. But so they did. We were told to withdraw. So I wasn't here, so I didn't have all the details about who actually withdrew it in court, who actually went to court, because none of the staff in my office did it, because they. It also wasn't a Cape Town matter, because I was involved in the Sheikh matter, so in the arms deal matters, and so they just continued working on those matters after I left. So it was a Gauteng matter, and someone in the Gauteng office went and withdrew the matter, because we act on the authority of the national director. So our affidavits are in the name of the national director. We sign them with authority delegated to us by the national director. So the national director, of course, overrode and could withdraw. But, after that happened, I didn't resign immediately. I had to come back and work back my sabbatical time and pay back some of my sabbatical money so that I could be released to go and do articles. But you know, I could see that the writing was on the wall, but I didn't realize that things would deteriorate to the extent that it did when I returned in 2019. But shall I talk a bit about...
Yes, because I noticed I have on my notes here that you left 2012 to return 2019.
Yes. So, but in between, I said what stood me in great stead is the reputation the asset forfeiture unit had internationally. So as soon as I started at the bar, worrying about where I was going to get work and how I was going to survive, colleagues from the Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative approached me and said they were doing a project in Tanzania with setting up with the DPP's office there, the Director of Public Prosecutions. They just adopted an asset recovery law, and they wanted to support that office with training. So I started off with the training that was about what we did when we started out the asset forfeiture unit. And it was really well received. They then, you know, it became a 2-year project, and then it became a 5-year project. And after a while, I was mentoring them quite consistently for a period of time. And out of that grew a whole lot of other projects that I did around the world, mostly in the first part, mostly on asset recovery. You know, asset management. I ended up writing a publication for UNODC on the I wrote it in my CV on the seizure, management and seizure. I'm too tired now. I can't even remember my own publication. Seized and confiscated assets. Yes,
we'll come to that even as part, because we're interested more in terms of this work experience in the NPA, but also how it adds value into that. So that I can take you through the question. I wanted you to take us through, because as I say, what is coming out is you leaving at 2019, come back at 2012, coming back at 2019, but only to leave in 2022.
Yes. So
now we understand why you left in 2012.
The first time.
Why did you leave in 2019?
So
in 2022, sorry.
2019, I arrived. I was called by the NDPP. I was, in fact, at the time in Tanzania. And she asked if I would consider leading up the investigating directorate. And I was certainly not convinced. But what intrigued me is I had been working in Sri Lanka, in Ukraine, Moldova, Kenya, all over Africa. And it's advisory work. So you pour your heart and soul into advising, and then it's up to the practitioners there to decide whether they're going to take your advice or not. And 9 times out of 10, life happens. And by the time you come back 6 months later, they're scrambling to make it look like they did some of the things we all agreed needed to happen. So I thought, I mean, I'd been doing this for 7 years. I'd been practicing at the bar. I'd learned an incredible amount of the practice of law, and I certainly want to come back to the experience of qualifying as an advocate in private practice as opposed to qualifying as a state advocate, which I think is critical to where the NPA finds itself today. But I came because I thought this is an incredible opportunity for me to implement some of the things I've advised people to implement in their own jurisdictions and haven't quite had the satisfaction of them doing it the way I think it should be done. So I agreed with the national director that I could do it for a few years. I still had relatively young children at the time and wasn't convinced that I should move them to Pretoria because I would have no time for them. I would disrupt them from their routine, but they'd not be available to support them in settling here. So my husband and I took the decision that they would stay in Cape Town and I would, and as far as possible, commute. So from a personal point of view, I wasn't off to a great start. But I don't think that that was the reason I left. I left for professional reasons. I left because I felt that I think I said in my response to the questions I had, I found that the space wasn't there for me to implement the things that I thought should be implemented. And I will give you a few examples, but you know, I was first struck by the levels of dysfunction that I thought I was seeing in the NPA. But I was surrounded by people, not everybody. I often get accused of saying everybody in the NPA is useless because I criticize some aspects of the NPA. But I certainly saw dysfunction that I thought needed to be addressed. But if you raise the criticism, the counterattack is, you know, you're negative and you don't. So I was in an organization where there was a narrative that actually everything's fine now in the NPA since the capturers were left. So now we can just be left alone to carry on as before. And that was definitely not my experience and certainly not what I thought needed to happen. And let me give some concrete examples. The one that I was most quoted for is that I said there's a skills catastrophe in the NPA.
You what?
A skills catastrophe.
Explain.
I'm prone to hyperbole, but what I meant, there was a skills crisis in the NPA. Mm-hmm. I still believe that. I must start immediately by saying that doesn't mean there aren't very good people in the NPA with very good experience. But as a rule, we are failing in ensuring that prosecutors have the skills that they need to come up against skilled legal professionals on the other side. And
this is across.
It's across the board, is in my opinion. Not everybody, but it's systemic. And I want to address the systemic causes. I don't think this is because there are individuals there who aren't hardworking or there are individuals there who don't take themselves seriously. We have designed the system to perpetually relegate prosecutors to second-class legal professionals. And that's the problem, you know, and that's the problem I felt very strongly needed to be addressed. But I kept being confronted with how many years of collective experience everybody had, because people have been there for 10 years, so they have 10 years experience. Whether they were actually practicing in court, when I tried to recruit people to the ID, I was looking for a specific type of skill. I wanted people who had conducted opposed trials, people with litigation skills, people who were confronted with large volumes of data and could extract from that a charge sheet or an indictment that spoke to the most serious offenses that were committed, but at the same time could get you a prosecution happening sooner rather than later. And the people who were already working on state capture cases when I arrived, I was told, here's the team working on state capture cases. I, by and large, didn't think were equal to the task. There were exceptions, but I'm just saying as a general rule. I met with management and I said, we need a skills audit. We need to understand what skills people actually have, not talk about 20 years experience because people have been in the NPA for 20 years. What were they doing in those 20 years? How many court appearances have they had and in opposed matters? I was told that a skills audit had been done before we came there. And I promise you, I'm quoting verbatim, the results were so depressing, we thought it would just demoralize staff if we released them. So for me, that's tantamount to saying, why don't we just bury our heads in the sand and hope this problem goes away? I wasn't given the results of that skills audit, and I said, it's probably dated anyway. Can we do a new skills audit? And I think a year ago, a skills audit was released, but only partially released, because it's an issue I'm interested in, so I keep an eye on parliamentary hearings where this issue is discussed. And we will all speculate if we have to talk about how many people in the NPA have the ability to cross-examine effectively. There are many ways to become an effective cross-examiner. Certainly the most brutal is being thrown in the deep end in cases and develop your experience like that. You can get good training in cross-examination. You can get good mentorship. But we don't know how people are getting those skills in the NPA, and we don't know how many people sit with those skills. But
is that the reason you left?
It's fights like that. Everything in the NPA was a fight. I needed to get a building for the IDAC, for staff in the IDAC to put down the dockets, have investigators come and work. I became an expert in how to procure from Public Works a building, because nobody else was supporting us getting a building. Or you would hear that there are reasons why it's difficult. And it's DPSA, or it's this department or that department. But I didn't find there was a drive. One of my staff members at the time was saying to me, you should actually ask the panel to get all the memos you wrote and see how many memos on every issue, from a deviation to procure staff. You know, I had to become an expert in all these public service processes, because you would be told that it's not possible to do what you want to do.
This is from, sorry to interject, I'm trying to understand, this is from NPA and the department?
It's from the administration in the NPA.
Okay.
And of course, the NPA administration would often say their hands are tied because of the DOJ administration. I wasn't that sure about that. But, you know, what you found in the NPA is a disinterest in implementing the policy that you want to implement. People were far more invested in saying why this can't be done than they were in trying to figure out how to do this. You know, I worked with Pulelani in those early days, and he had a can-do attitude and a let's get it done attitude. Around Pagad, you know, in the Western Cape, he stuck his neck out and said, you will give computers to the investigation team working on that matter. And I will explain at Parliament why I made an urgent decision to procure in that way. So, you know, it does take leadership to say, this is what needs to be done. Of course, you must do it within the prescripts and within the confines of the law, but find a way to do it. Don't tell me it's not possible. Because if it's not possible, write me a memo on why you say that, and I can escalate the issue to the people not making it not possible. But, you know, it was exhausting and frustrating, because on the one hand, you're trying to build cases. On the other hand, you have nothing. You have no staff, no infrastructure, no budget, just generally no support. Very quickly, I was getting memos about how I was responsible for irregular expenditure, or, you know, memos saying that I was breaking the law. And I realized that I'm on a hiding to nowhere here. And I also thought that, you know, I'm not getting any traction at senior management level on what I think are the priority issues that we need to address. I was very early on labeled problematic, and it pretty much descended from there. That I didn't get much support. Every little ounce of infrastructure that we got, I can give you a volume of memos that I had to write to justify, to follow up, to overcome objections or overcome constraints. And meanwhile, in the public court of public opinion, we're being pilloried for not delivering on the prosecutions. And on that front even, I felt undermined. I had certainly had clear ideas about the strategy that I wanted to implement in our cases. The Nulani case for me is a...
We're going to come to that because I'm interested in your vision going forward.
Yes.
Let's get to the point where we complete our section of the questionnaire. We have gone through your legal background and your work in terms of what. Maybe just talk a bit about the poker work. I think you didn't go into detail, and then we'll go the prosecuting side we've done, and I'm interested more your experience in law, criminal, civil, and all that. If you can do that.
Yes, thank you, Minister. The poker work, as I said, is my proudest achievement and most satisfying. But it wasn't always like that. When we opened up shop as the asset forfeiture unit, there were no takers. No one was interested in using the provisions of the Prevention of Organized Crime Act to recover proceeds and instruments of crime. In fact, all legal professionals, prosecution, defense lawyers, certainly constitutional lawyers, everyone was convinced it's unconstitutional. You cannot take away the assets of someone who is not convicted of a crime on the basis that you say it's proceeds of crime. So the conservative legal fraternity, and probably judges at the apex of that conservatism, did not believe that any of the provisions of poker were constitutional. And every case we were able to put together was challenged in the Constitutional Court, which is why we have such a rich body of constitutional jurisprudence. And I don't know if anyone here remembers, but our early cases was met with much fanfare, typical of even the Scorpions in the day. We had cartoons saying Willie's removals when we were loading assets of criminals into the truck and taking it off. And then a few weeks later, Willie's returnals because we lost the cases in the early days, which we realized meant we had to regroup, and hence the strategy of bringing in the most senior, serious legal minds in the country to present the cases in court. And very quickly, we developed jurisprudence on the key issues, that it is constitutional to seize assets. It's constitutional to even approach the court ex parte in the early days. We litigated so many issues in the early days, and we have a very proud body of constitutional jurisprudence that I train people in other parts of the world on, because you listen to people now talk about asset recovery as if it's very ordinary, as if it's a no-brainer that this is the way to deal with organized crime. Back in the day, we were treated with a lot of suspicion, thinking, what is this newfangled ideas that we're coming with? But I think under the leadership of Willie Hofmeyr, I think, I was privileged to have really good bosses in my day. Bulelani was one, Willie Hofmeyr was certainly another. I have great respect for his strategic ability. He's not infallible, nobody is, but I certainly respect the vision that he executed in the asset forfeiture unit. I almost lost track of where I am.
No, it's in the law explaining
Yeah, the
yourself. You
poker.
started with, so you need to go into the areas of other law.
Other law, okay.
Experience in criminal and civil and all that.
So most of my experience, I don't have experience prosecuting cases. I think someone raised that as an issue and asked, did I think it was necessary to have this experience? Obviously, it's a very important advantage to actually have been in the trenches and done the work that you expect prosecutors to go and do day in and day out. It's also, when my career was fashioned in asset recovery, which was predominantly civil work, and there wasn't a lot of civil experience in the NPA, so we largely built a capability from scratch, trying to recruit people from the private sector. So better, and there were lots of curious and interested prosecutors who also, we considered ourselves the mavericks, not the run-of-the-mill people, because we were willing to try new things. And asset forfeiture was way more satisfying than prosecution, because it just could happen in a lot faster time frame than the prosecution seemed to be happening. The skills that you need to be effective in asset recovery, as opposed to prosecution, is good writing skills and good synthesizing of evidence skills. And we found that that's actually not a skill as abundant as we would like it to be in the prosecution. Prosecutors typically fill out pro forma charge sheets, and the evidence is collected by the police, so the affidavits are drawn by police officers. Prosecutors review the docket, and, as they become more senior, they will write a charge sheet or an indictment with a summary of substantial facts. But writing skills are not abundant, weren't abundant in the NPA. And I guess, again, I'm going to be pilloried for not saying that there are people who have very good skills. I'm not saying everybody doesn't have the skills, but I think sufficient numbers to make us worry and develop a plan to address it is what I mean. I litigated, but I didn't run trials. I would be involved in the odd inquiry, confiscation inquiry, where you lead evidence, but to establish the value of benefits derived from criminal activity. But I did not run trials because I didn't feel like I had any training or any experience, and I didn't. I first developed that experience when I went to the bar and did pupillage, where I spent a year getting a really excellent grounding in criminal procedure, civil procedure, and just high court practice, trial work, and then obviously wrote the bar exams at the end. The mentorship at the bar, I think, was really critical in helping me. So when I was in private practice, I ran trials. Again, not as many as I would have liked, because I think opportunities weren't that many. Trials are really intensive work and take long periods of time to progress, but I certainly had trial experience then.
Okay, let's move to the next area. I think it's only at the AFU that you've given us the number of people that belonged to where you worked. But here, you were responsible for the Western Cape.
Yes.
And then you are giving us that the initial staff have grown. This is 200 nationally.
Nationally,
not
yes.
in where you were.
No.
So we're looking at yourself when you supervised. How many people you had since in that area as head of FIU?
Yes. So asset forfeiture is always only a very small component. We would have police officers from SAP seconded, co-located, and so we would have joint strategy and management meetings. But I don't think I ever supervised more than 20 people, I would say.
In ID, staff complement, you were establishing it and all
Yes.
that. By the time you left, how many staff?
by the time I left, there were certainly more people than I could identify even. I thought I did provide a number for the ID staff. It's in the responses.
Yeah, I looked
because
for it in the questionnaire, I couldn't find.
it's not in the questionnaire, it's in the responses.
Or in the responses of the...
Yes, because I was asked, I was said I didn't do anything while I was on the ID, and I had to respond. And I took from a document that the NDPP had presented to Parliament. Thank you very much. Yeah. So, yeah. The ID was now, after 2.5 years, over 120 staff members.
Over 120 staff,
Yes.
okay. Is that the highest staff complement that you've managed in your career? Because others, it's consulting work.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. And then your management style?
My management style. So, in my career in the NPA, I've actually occupied sort of leadership management positions. I was on the AFU national management team, and we met monthly. And I was also involved in many management initiatives for the broader NPA. And from time to time, we would be sent on these management training things where you get psychoanalyzed and your management style gets pinpointed. And typically, I am described as the person who will get the job done. There may be some bodies in the wake in the process of achieving the objective, but I'm the kind of person, when the chips are down, I'm over-focused on the outcome. And yes, there may be some casualties in the process.
Let's go. I hear you avoiding to use the words. Am I correct? Is it an issue that you are being said that you focus on getting the work and leave others behind? Or is it the fact that are you able to bring, because NDPP position, it's leadership, and
Yes.
you have DNDPPs, you have DPPs, so it's an EXCO and an extended EXCO that you have to be bringing along. So I'm trying to understand in that context that you are saying, are you not going to leave them behind?
So I certainly, the people I have led, I don't know people who complain that I've left them behind. These kind of assessments is when the chips are down, what kind of person are you? And I want to give just one example, and then I'll move on. I had an employee in the asset forfeiture unit in Cape Town who was in an abusive relationship, and a husband, who at the time happened to be a magistrate, was allegedly beating her up. And she came to work, and we were trying to figure out how to support her. And I said to her, the organization has infrastructure and support. But I also said to her, I can't help you with your personal problem. I can direct you to services that the organization has. And also, here, we have a job to do, and we have to deliver. And I have staff members here who have all sorts of other challenges. I have someone who has a wife who has cancer. I have someone who has difficulty managing their children. When they show up here, I expect them to deliver the mandate that we've all undertaken to deliver on, and to do the work as best we can. So I can assure you that in this space, you are protected, you are supported, and you can thrive. But there's very little I can do to impact on your personal situation. Safe to say, you need to keep the boundaries clear and then to draw on the support. Now, at the time, she wasn't very impressed with me, but I think we're still friends today. So I'm that kind of person. I'll be open, honest, and frank with you. You'll never not know where you stand. But I do want to say something.
Okay, maybe let's get to decision-making process.
Yes. That's
I
is
think that will
important.
help us understand your
Yes.
management.
So I am the kind of manager who likes to get to the bottom of the problem, that I want to understand it properly, and I want to get as many and as diverse a set of views. But we will agree, and then we'll hold ourselves accountable to what we've agreed. So my challenge with management in the NPA is, as the national director, I'm not sure that you're a manager. Who do you manage? More importantly, what tools do you have to manage? If you're saying the national director manages the DNDPPs and the DPPs, well, she can't fire them. She can't even discipline them. So what tools do you have to exact performance out of? And I'm not saying I'm looking for punitive measures, but at the end of the day, if someone performs poorly and there's no consequences, or I must write to the minister, who will write to the president, who will consider having an inquiry into the fitness of the person to hold office, it's not a very effective management tool. So that's a really important issue to address. You know, how exactly, what exactly is the management relationship, and what is the accountability? I have views, very strong views on those issues, but I think it's wrong to say that the NDPP manages those people. The NDPP has instruments like policy directives, prosecution policy. She can set standards, and then she can and must ensure that people follow and comply with those standards. But if they don't, her options are limited, right? She can write reports and go to Parliament and do all sorts of things, but at the end of the day, she's stuck with her hands tied behind her back.
In terms of, because the fitness to hold office is the powers that lies with the president.
Yes.
Not even with the minister.
The minister, the NDPP also has a role, you know, in preparing the case for poor performance or for incompetence or for anything more serious. But I think we know now it's not a very effective mechanism to hold people accountable.
Let's get to, maybe I'll come back to it, because I want us to explore that, especially in your incident where a decision was taken of reversing the case. Wouldn't we have a catastrophe if we were to find ourselves in such a situation and wake up that the NDPP has fired all the DTPPs without a process?
Yes, I'm not saying give the NDPP carte blanche to just fire at will, because I think these are they're constitutionally very important positions. But I think, you know, it's a balance. We have to have accountability, but we have to be efficient in how we exact that accountability. And we need to re-look at our mechanisms and see if they have been effective. A whole inquiry that can go on for months on months to determine if one DPP is or isn't, I'm not sure what. You know, I think is not an effective mechanism. And I was under the impression that the president was reviewing the NPA Act, you know, and looking at appointment and dismissal mechanisms. But I think it's not, I'm less worried about the appointment and dismissal processes of the NDPP, because I think that's now well established in law. I don't think there are issues there. It's the next layer and the next level where we don't have the kind of transparency we need, and we don't have the mechanisms we need to make sure that people are being held accountable.
That's one of my tasks, to work on that review of the legislation.
I'm very glad to hear.
Yeah, no,
it has also been the task of many of your predecessors, so I'm looking forward to.
I get that. Let's move to the next point, and quite fair review is not only you who makes that comments. Quite a lot of people say there should be not only that, but the operational and financial independence, administrative and financial independence
I also have my
thank you.
own views on that, so
Oh,
we
is
can
it?
come to that, yes, which will
We'll
be a little
come to
different.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then let's move to the issue around, I think we've covered the issues in terms of management and your leadership. Ethics and integrity. Can I confirm that you've never been charged, you've never been suspended, you've never been dismissed, you've never been reported to a law body?
I said no, but I do recall that shortly after I left the NPA in 2022, I worked at Open Secrets, and two complaints were leveled at me, one by Paul O'Sullivan and one by the NDPP itself. And the allegations
The
were...
current NDPP?
Yes.
Okay.
The allegations were that I was using information that I had at my disposal when I was investigating director, and unlawfully sharing that information with researchers at Open Secrets, which was responsible for reports that they had produced on state capture issues. Paul O'Sullivan wrote to the board of Open Secrets saying that what I was doing was criminal and he was going to lay criminal charges. The NDPP wrote to the board saying that they were concerned that this was the case. I wrote to the board, I came very close to litigating, but saying that there was absolutely no evidence. I mean, the Zondo Commission had reported by that point. There was very little about state capture that wasn't already in the public domain. I think that people didn't like the accountability work that was coming out of Open Secrets, and so this was just an intimidation tactic. It didn't go any further. I did get called by journalists saying, are you breaking the law or something? And I explained, but the board, I think, wrote back to both parties and said they didn't see that there was any merit. But if they felt there was a crime being committed, they should certainly report it to the authorities. I don't know that a case was ever opened.
Okay. So that's where it ended,
That's where it
from your
ended.
knowledge, and never reported even to LPC or anyone as a practicing...
Nope.
No. Okay.
Nope.
No, thanks.
I'm in good standing with the LPC.
Okay. And then moving into the financial and property, in terms of directorship and interest in business, you've got a 15% interest in property?
Yes,
Explain.
with my husband and his sisters, we jointly own a property.
You own a property, or you own a property company?
No, we own a property in those shares, 15% each own a share in the property. So it's not a company. It's just we are all just co-owners of a property.
Is it a business property?
No. It gets let out from time to time.
Oh, so it's got income for...
Yes.
So it's like when you have a house and then
And you rent it out, yes.
Okay.
That's
It's
how
not
it is.
like you're running a formal business.
No.
Okay.
It's like an
because I wasn't
Airbnb
sure
type
if I
thing.
understand it.
Airbnb type.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
people.
That's fine. And then I think, and then you've disclosed your health condition, but which has never impacted on your work, and we don't see it as impacting on your work. So I don't think that's an issue for us. Okay. Now I think that concludes our questionnaire, which took long because it was very detailed, which I'm not complaining because it's helpful as well. Just moving on, and as I said earlier on, I parked you, but I want you to give us, with what you know of NPA, having been in, having been out, not fully out because I can hear, still quite do a lot of research, analysis of the work that is being done by NPA. What would be those things that you do should you be appointed? The vision of NPA, and how would you help to solve some of the issues that you have identified?
I wanted to ask that I just talk a little bit about what I've been doing since I left the NPA, because it'll feed into what I think should happen and what I would want to implement. So last year, I spent 6 months working with the National Anti-Corruption Bureau in Ukraine. I traveled to Kyiv 2 times, and what the job was to review the effectiveness of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau in Ukraine. Ukraine has very similar corruption challenges to South Africa. While they have a war going on, we have sort of low-grade murders and other problems that are actually very comparable. And, you know, I found the experience incredibly valuable because, A, I could sort of digest the 3 years of experience I had working in the NPA, trying to set up an anti-corruption capability in the NPA, with one that had been going now for about 8 years in Ukraine. And I was sitting with 2 other international experts, reviewing the effectiveness, looking at what data should they have and should they be able to present to demonstrate their effectiveness, looking at their decision-making, looking at the impact. So I think that was a really important piece of work from which I learned a lot. The next, and actually let me just say that I think the thing that struck me the most from that work and the work with NACAC is that I've always been in law enforcement, and I probably was a snob when it comes to prevention issues, corruption prevention. I saw it as fluffy, publicity, kind of talking to people about why corruption is bad. I think what I learned from Ukraine is that unless you use prevention measures effectively, you end up with systemic corruption. So the 3 areas where I think South Africa could learn a lot from a country like Ukraine is in financial disclosure forms. Now, every government department and every public servant at a certain level can tell you that we fill in these forms, and we're very proud to announce every year that we have 100% compliance with filling in the form. And then what happens? Who's looking at that form? Who is making sure that disclosures that haven't been made but should have been made are being investigated? Or who is assessing whether there's a wealth commensurate with the income that the person is disclosing? We do not have an effective system for managing disclosures, and we can eliminate a lot of public servant excess by using tools, computer tools. So in Ukraine, they have a very effective system of taking those forms. Firstly, they have a very effective form. Ours could use an upgrade. They take the data and measure it against other databases like the immovable property trust, all these systems that you can just assess, does this person own a property that they didn't disclose, and have red flags. And then we need people to follow up and actually assess consequences that should happen. So, our system is a little archaic. The same goes for our conflict of interest system. We have in the law, we all, although it's debatable whether we're all on the same page. Excuse me? It's not within.
I want you to tell me, what would you do with that?
Yes, okay. Yes.
Sorry. This one of
Prevention.
Disclosures and everything we can deal with. I think public service, it's good to have that advice, but I'm looking for
yes,
the NDPP.
But I will
and the
just
NPA
say
for the future.
that NACAC proposed that we have to set up structures to deal with systemic corruption. I think we need to focus on getting the basics right, and doing. But I hear you. I have views on the role of the SIU and really giving it teeth to do prevention, but that's for another soapbox. Right? So coming to the NPA, the skills catastrophe remains my enduring concern. And it's a concern about how we appoint prosecutors and how we become qualified as prosecutors. So prosecutors have always been, as a law student, you first look for a job in the private sector or somewhere else, and if all those doors are closed, then you think about applying to the prosecution. Again, not everybody does that, because there are a lot of prosecutors who come out of the womb passionate about being a prosecutor. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the average law students. You know, when they want to get employed, they know that they're going to, if they get a private sector job, they have a much better prospect of a successful trajectory in their career. In the prosecution, what the Legal Practice Act sought to do was to create some uniformity across the profession. What your predecessor was encouraged to do by your pre-predecessor was encouraged to do by the NPA was to drop the standard for prosecutors in terms of just qualification. So while all other legal professionals must have a 4-year LLB, in the prosecution, a 3-year qualification suffices, right? So that kind of, most prosecutors have an LLB. Probably 95% have an LLB. But it creates this dual system now where the standard for the one is lower. But that's not where it ends, right? In private practice, whether you're an attorney or an advocate, you need a period of mentorship, right? And most prosecutors will tell you that you become a prosecutor in the trenches. You learn while doing. But we must make sure that you're learning from people who are doing the right thing and who really know what they're doing, right? So in the private sector, for attorneys and advocates, those who have mentoring responsibilities must themselves meet certain criteria. There are none in the NPA. In the private sector, you have to have undergo a curriculum. As an attorney, it will take you 1 year or 2 years. As an advocate, it will take you 1 year of pupillage. That program has to be accredited by the LPC. We have the aspirant prosecutor program. It's not accredited. Why can we not have it accredited? Why can we not make sure that it is delivered at a standard that satisfies the LPC? I mean, obviously, there needs to be significant input from the prosecution because prosecuting is not the same as litigating in other areas. But the whole idea with the LPC was to create greater parity. The third area is, so accredited, a proper period of mentorship, and then an exam at the end, right, that you have to pass. And it's an independent exam. So
the current exam process is not?
The aspirant prosecutor program, even itself, is a shadow of its former self. But I think what my experience is traveling around the world and looking at prosecution authorities and what makes them successful, you will never pay enough money to attract good lawyers in the private sector to the prosecution. It's never going to be about the money. There's that small percentage of people who from the womb want to become prosecutors. You've got them, don't worry about them. But then there's a large proportion of people who are casting around to try and figure out where will they be fulfilled, where can they apply their skills. What the successful prosecuting authorities do is the training they offer is top class. Right? In the US, for example, the Ivy League schools, they first want to go to the prosecution. Then they want to go to be a clerk for a judge. Then they want to go into private practice. And the reason for that is it's known you will get the best training in litigation anywhere because the state litigates. If you're in a law firm or in private practice, you have to wait for the client to walk in with the right case. So there's a supply of work, and then excellent training. And that's what we have to do. We have to provide excellent training to attract people. I think we, thanks to Pulelani and a few others, the salary level at entry level is quite attractive, you know, because you can get exploited in the private sector early on in your career. If you survive and you carry on in your career in the private sector, you can earn way more money than you'll ever earn in the prosecution. But we sleep better at night and we have other perks. So it is a lost opportunity to make sure that prosecutors are offered the best training. It's not a hard thing to do. It's not an expensive thing to do. And it just is something that will be in the interest of everybody. It's a systemic solution that ensures that you have these people who have to come up against people who have had this kind of training, you know, are able to compete. And if you ever wanted to visit a country that has done this very effectively, I commend Zambia to you, because Zambia has required all prosecutors to go through the same professionalization process as private lawyers. And the caliber of people and you know, Zambia has just they prosecute former presidents, first ladies get their asset seized routinely. So I think it does make a difference. And I think, for me, this is something I wrote many memos about when I was in the NPA. I read the NPA annual report every year to see where are we, because we have a crisis coming, because in 2018, advocates, you know, before 2018, people like me could get rights of appearance if you, with just an LLB, you could become a legal practitioner. You can't do that anymore. So people in the NPA are stuck, right? I can show you many ways in which this impacts. Recruitment. You know, we struggle to recruit. The attrition rates are low, but when we do appoint, it's internal, right? So we don't attract people from outside. Why is that? It's because when we advertise for a junior state advocate post and we say we want 3 to 5 years experience, right? We treat 3 to 5 experience in the district court the same as 3 to 5 years experience as an advocate at the bar. And I'm not saying they're not comparable at all, but I don't think they're comparable one for one. To get senior state advocates, you know, we have junior members of the bar on display at the commissions, right? And
I've got members who would want to do a follow-up.
Yes.
As to represent
So,
that part, yeah.
my point is, unless we create that parity, there are a lot of advocates who won't be able to go and practice outside of the NPA because they would have to do pupillage or attorneys' mentorship. And I suspect when that day comes, when this cohort of junior advocates in the NPA need right of appearance in the High Court, we'll make another special arrangement for the prosecution. Whereas this is not a popular, I've raised this issue with many prosecutors, and they will bite your head off if you discuss this issue, because there are lots of defenses, right? But I think it's an issue that must be tackled head on.
Mr. Mtlo.
Thank you, Minister. Advocate Kronje, I just want us to zoom in to your classification of this skills challenge. You classify it as skills catastrophe. Now, when you are at a catastrophic level, this becomes the worst level that you can think of. So the worst level would then mean that there is the controls or any interventions are non-existent. They're not there at all. It's skills catastrophe. Now, I would want you to think of it that are you not exaggerating the challenge by classifying it at that lowest level. And I'm saying this against the backdrop of what you've actually said in terms of those interventions that are there, such as aspirant prosecutors program. If it is there, it is a form of ensuring preparedness of new entrants into the space. So perhaps it could be an issue of revising that program to put in place other measures to put it at a level that is desired.
As I said.
So that's one leg to it. And exaggerating classification of this challenge, don't you think it also sort of diagnosed the problem without having examined the challenge? I'm saying this against the backdrop of also that what does not come from you is that there are so many prosecutors, and we have identified as part of the skills deficit certain areas that they lack in, and as a result, there could be a need to come with an intervention, a training intervention. And this may come across as casting aspersions on even those who are capable, and looking at it, and this may also go and have some unintended consequences of eroding public trust and confidence in the current crop of public prosecutors. And you gauge it against and this is what the outcome-based approach would talk to, that you gauge it against the percentage of conviction rate, for instance, with regards to matters that are being prosecuted. Are we at a level where the rate is so appalling and so low that it really justify your classification of skills catastrophe? I would like you to rethink of it, rethink this position, and tell me if it does not necessarily exaggerate the challenge that you are raising on skills issues within the NPA.
I take the point. I said I'm prone to exaggeration. I did start by describing it as, certainly in my career, I started off as saying, this is something we need to address right from the get-go. When I look at the training in the private sector compared to the training in the prosecution. When I started at the NPA in 2019 as the ID, I went looking for skills. I went looking for people who can do these serious, complex cases. I really battled to find people, and maybe there are a lot of competent prosecutors who didn't want to do this kind of anti-corruption work. It's very career limiting. It's a lot of trouble. You can take a nice, safe job somewhere else. You don't have to do it. So maybe, people, I had to look for volunteers. I had to beg people to come and do these state capture cases, and there weren't many takers, right? Which is why I then asked if we could do an audit of where these skills are in the NPA so that, we can then approach those people and target them and encourage them and entice them to come and work in the NPA. But I really feel you shouldn't have to take my word for it, whether it's a crisis or a catastrophe or just a problem, right? You need the NPA to communicate that. I quoted in my responses some of the statistics, and I'm so glad you raised the conviction rate issue. It has been debunked year in, year out. as an adequate measure of how the NPA is performing. You know, our enrollment rates compared to our conviction rates, what are they? I bet not even the minister can tell me, because it's not being reported on. Because if it were to be reported on, you would be agreeing with me. Maybe we have a catastrophe on our hands. People have made, the public is frustrated with state capture prosecutions. They will continue to be frustrated with state capture prosecutions, because I am not convinced that we have the skills. There are a lot of other issues. It's not just skills, but the skills to put together the kind of charge sheets, the kind of indictments that are needed, I don't know that we have in the NPA. And unless we confront that, I worked with colleagues in the US on the ABB prosecution and the McKinsey prosecution. We were working alongside one another. And it became very clear to me very quickly, we will just never be able to mount a prosecution of McKinsey in the way that the US DOJ was mounting a prosecution of McKinsey. So, okay, that's setting the bar very high. But, if we don't confront it, and I think the reason why I'm prone to exaggerating, because people are not taking the issue seriously. It's eminently solvable. You can address it, but you have to confront it. I do think that our performance has plummeted. And I mean, I can refer you to statistics. The NPA does not publish these statistics. It used to publish. In 2005 and 2006, we used to tell you how many cases we enrolled in a year, and then you get a sense of how many of those. So enrollment is where we say, as the NPA, there's a prosecutable case here, right? Of those, roughly half will get to a point where there's a verdict. Not a guilty verdict or not just a verdict, right? A discharge or guilty or not guilty. Now, it's very easy to get a 98% conviction rate because, firstly, you incentivize prosecutors not to take risky cases. Don't take difficult cases. They'll keep sending the police back saying, but wasn't there maybe a video? Isn't there DNA evidence? Isn't there something, the case will drag on forever until it's like, I take that case and they'll probably plead guilty on the spot, right? So we are not incentivizing prosecutors to take difficult cases to court because we're chasing a 96, 94, 98% conviction rate. It's unhealthy to have conviction rates like that. I don't know what you're prosecuting if you have those levels of success. But I think we need to relook at the statistics that we generate and to show performance. A study was done on SECUs. The absolute plummeting of performance, of productivity. In 2019, SECU prosecutors were prosecuting 6 cases a month on average. They're down to less than 1. We have more prosecutors now. We also have more crime now, but we are putting through fewer cases. That doesn't even start us on the delay problem, right? The Stalingrad problem that is described as this mysterious phenomenon that we are just at a loss for what to do about. If we are not going to prepare to interrogate the problems in the NPA and brutally look at what's working and what's not working and fix what's not working, then we are forever going to be disappointed. So I hear you, I should temper my language and not call it a catastrophe. I'm trying to get attention to the issue. But it probably isn't a catastrophe because it's fixable. I believe it's eminently fixable. I'm just frustrated that we don't take the steps to fix it.
Okay. Just a follow-up, Minister. Please, in no way do I even suggest that you should temper your language. but I'm saying against what is known and against what I have submitted to you, there is element of exaggeration. And if then there is element of exaggeration and the basis of this exaggeration is so that we are becoming alarmists, we want to draw attention, perhaps, and you want to draw attention because no one seems to be listening. And I'm looking at it from an angle that then says that this would become, it's actually a false alarm that is raised because of mischaracterization of the challenge. We don't have to exaggerate the challenge to grab the attention. That's
Fair comment.
Yes.
Fair comment. But the only issue I take is, you know, you can ask, why am I back here if I think it's so disastrous, right? I do think that we are at the point in the country now where it's undeniable that we have serious problems in the NPA, and that we need to actually come up with a diagnosis. You know, what is the diagnosis? Why? And I dispute the narrative that it's only in complex corruption cases that we're not doing so well. I utterly dispute that. And I think that if we looked at the data that is coming out of the courts, it's a problem across the board. You know, when the Constitutional Court took away that lifeline that the prosecution used, which is to prosecute people for possession of dagga, our performance plummeted. We're still trying to recover. So tell me, I'm very glad to hear that there's a 96% conviction rate, but what are you convicting and what impact is it having on the society? So I am prone to exaggeration, and I really must take your criticism and your advice to heart, because I do think that that is how people are alienated. But I feel frustrated. I feel like the boy crying wolf or something. I don't know. But I feel frustrated that we are not addressing the real issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. Thanks, Advocate. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Advocate Cronje. I hear you, and may I even add and say I feel you. But I'm just worried about your analysis. I know it's not a diagnosis, because a diagnosis you will be able to do effectively when you're inside. But your analysis from outside is very problematic for me. For example, if you say, you know, young people from university see better prospects of success when they go to the private sector, it is a myth. Those young people, it depends on which university they come from. It depends on a whole lot of things, including their personal background. And those that make it to the Big Five sometimes end up after 7 years of never having set foot in the court, but having spent a lot of time on the photocopying machine, photocopying for their counterparts, being on antidepressants. So I'm worried about this rosy picture that we want to give on the one side, but I'm also worried about the total gloom and doom that we want to give on the outside. You know why I'm worried about the total gloom and doom? Our constitutional dispensation demands of us that we provide administrative justice, that we provide a responsive public service. And a responsive public service, therefore, needs us to have a mindset to know that there are different levels of people on this race. Some have been left behind, and therefore, the paces are different. it demands of us that we be aware of the different levels of need and how we can meet them. A simple advice center has a place in our society. You know, and that advice center, we cannot then, you know, present things. And I know you did not say that, but the interpretation and the dragging of your thinking could be, what then about advice centers? What then about sexual offenses, for example, that you're going to be dealing with? Where at face value and through its manifestation, it has got nothing to do with corruption. But the tail end of whether somebody gets convicted or not has got everything to do with corruption. In fact, why women are more vulnerable, it could even be to a large extent because of corruption. So it worries me that we're looking at this conservative Lani definition of corruption. And I'm not saying that, I'm saying I understood it that way. That is why we say people at private sector have got a better prospect. No, the students who leave university after 7 years, they're depressed because those very private sectors have told them you do not fit. Or if you fit, you're going to fit in our terms. The people at the bar who leave and are in serious debt. You know, so I just wanted to say, please, if you could give that sensitivity to this. It's not all black and white. It's different layers and shades of gray. Thanks.
I accept.
You want to comment on that, or should I move to the next?
I will comment as I go. I take it as advice.
Thank you very much, Advocate Cronje. You were there at the beginning. You were there at the establishment of the institution of the NPA and its specialized agencies. At some point, you encountered all the challenges that you alluded to, and you quitted. Now you're coming back to an NPA which is facing even a bigger mountain with prospects that, given the number of cases that might be coming in future, you may be facing even more frustrations. Do you have the guts, the gumption, the stamina to take the punishment of the position? Because at some point you said, I tend to be impulsive at times. Will you?
Stay the distance.
Yeah.
I was asked when I came back the last time, in 2019, as I said, by someone who wanted to know, is it even doable, right? Because it was a journalist who had been reporting on the NPA for years and said, it's looking quite grim, right? And I said, well, I'm the kind of person who believes that it's an important institution. You know, I've been passionate about this institution. I've been away from this institution, but you can ask the people in the institution. The 7 years I was outside, I knew more about what was going on in the NPA than most people in the NPA. I've watched every parliamentary hearing that the NPA has been at. So when I left the NPA, it's not because I don't have stamina. It's because I am realistic about what can be achieved. I asked myself, where am I going with this? I was pretty clear that if I remained in the NPA, I would probably be arrested on charges for irregular expenditure or something like that, or doing something that, because I was frustrated. So I've never left the NPA to abandon the NPA. I've left the NPA and I've gone elsewhere. And I've continued to work on the NPA. So what I didn't get a chance to talk about is the work I've done with the World Bank on the NPA, the work I've done with STAR, the Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative, in trying to help the NPA recover the funds abroad. You know, most times the NPA don't want to work with me, but if the gap closes, the last year I spent working with magistrates and judges on why we have the kind of delays we see in criminal prosecutions, really trying to understand what is behind this problem and what are the issues what are the things we can do to address them. I've just finished writing a report on our recommendations that we have sent to the minister. And in January, we're going to have a workshop with the judiciary on what can be done to address the crisis. Is it a catastrophe? It's certainly a crisis. We have a crisis when it comes to postponements and delays. I believe that. But I don't describe these things in a way that I want people to be demoralized. So I'm worried that both of you have perceived me to be hopeless about this. I'm not hopeless. I believe that we have solutions to these things, but we're never going to implement them if we don't confront the reality. If we're going to pretend that it's all hunky-dory and, you know, we can just keep carrying on like we are, we are not going to address it. And there's so much potential in the NPA. There are many good people in the NPA. Many of them have sent me messages saying, you know, hopefully this is going to work out. There are also many people in the NPA who will do everything to make sure I don't get appointed. So it is.
Maybe just to come in, you said that NPA does not want to work with you.
Well,
is it individual, because I worry about
yes,
that.
yes.
Is that individuals in the NPA, and what happens when you're appointed as the NDPP? Would you go back and say, you didn't want to work with me, therefore you're going? Or there'll be chaos, catastrophe.
Yes.
Just explain that,
yeah.
so that we all don't take it in a context that you don't mean. So be
Yes.
specific about it so that we are clear
Yeah.
from that point. Sorry, Prof, to come in because I just picked up that word and it worried me.
I think that's very fair. When I left the NPA, I didn't really have an opportunity to explain why I was leaving. You know, a press conference was held and things were said. I'm very outspoken and I did wish I had an opportunity, but I also felt that I was so emotional at the time. I was so intensely raw that I was concerned about what I would say. Like many people are worried when I speak. What is she going to say next? So I thought, you know, I needed time to reflect. I needed time to think about what happened in that experience because I did struggle with the management team. I really, not on personal issues, because some of my best friends were in the management team. You know, Advocate Omar Abaji Rasitaba was my boss for many years, and I had a lot to do with her coming back to the NPA. So I have lots of people, I have very close working relationships. And I continued working with the AFU when other units in the NPA were not very willing to work with me. So nobody said they won't work, but I think people assumed, and certainly the media were reporting this blow-up between me and the NDPP, that if you want to advance in the NPA, maybe that one is a problem and stay away from her. But it hasn't actually impacted on me doing the work that I've wanted to do with the NPA. So I've done the work with NACAC, but it needed time. It needed time for me to...
NACAC is not NPA.
Yes.
NACAC is an advisory body of the president.
Yes.
That mainly would work even at the executive level with us. That's why the report will be with me, not
Yes,
with NPA.
yes.
So they would have consulted, so that can constitute, but I get your point. That what you were trying to communicate, at least I'm comfortable.
I mean, the NPA is also very hierarchical, and people, like to not upset the hierarchy. And there was a perception that maybe working with me would upset the hierarchy. I certainly...
Said the NDPP, that's what you mean, because it's
Probably,
perceived.
yes,
that
it's perceived,
you had,
yes,
but
yes.
Like you said, the media reported
Yes,
that.
and I was
you
told
had-
by colleagues in UNODC that on asset forfeiture, they would have loved to work with me, but they don't want to create the impression that they're choosing my side over another side. So I think, it certainly
So
was an
this-
issue, but I've been
this
working.
went as far as the UNDOC.
I do a lot of work with UNODC. So I do a lot of work around the country with UNODC, yes. But I have worked with the NPA on asset recovery issues. I'm supporting them in Doha next week again. So
I'm leading that delegation.
I'm aware.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
I took over from Prof.
Yes.
That part clarified.
But
Yes,
thank you very much, Chairperson. My next question, you did allude to the issue of the state capture, which directly impacted on the NPA. Can you walk us through that and indicate what impact it had and indicate the before and after? And you can also conclude by saying, does it still have the elements of that capture, or you just have an organization which have different kinds of leadership problems today?
So there are now new allegations of capture in the latest commissions. I think that an organization like the NPA will never be free of attempts at capture and allegations of capture. I remember working in asset forfeiture. Every case you did, you would be told, but why us? It's selectively targeting us when there's so many other people doing the same kind of thing. Why don't you target them? All you can say is, give us the evidence and we'll get around to it, but right now we're dealing with you. But especially corruption, anti-corruption authorities are going to be targeted because the NPA has the capacity and the ability to put people behind bars, right, and really upend their lives. So if you're being investigated, the higher up in the ranks you are, the more power you have to disrupt them, the more likely you're going to use that power. So again, we are not unique. This is a problem prosecuting authorities and anti-corruption authorities around the world face, right? That's why UNCAC has standards around issues like how to ensure integrity of staff, right? How to ensure that prosecutors act with professionalism, take decisions independently. For me, these are systemic issues that you have to get right. Because if you don't, you make the organization much more vulnerable to those inevitable attempts, whether it's the private sector, whether it's gangsters, whether it's organized crime, whether it's senior politicians. They all will target the NPA to undermine it so that it doesn't successfully work against them. So again here, there are examples of corrupt prosecutors. I uncovered a corrupt prosecutor that I had worked with for many years. And I was appalled to discover that this is actually far more routine now. In fact, a survey was held when I was still there among prosecutors about how many prosecutors had been offered bribes. It was a staggering 60-odd%. Offered bribes to make a case go away. Many of them, of course, said, we wouldn't take it. We wouldn't dream of taking it. The problem is it's a crime to be offered a bribe, a crime which you need to report. So the next question was, did you report it to your supervisor? And the numbers plummeted because most people didn't think that's something you want to, get yourself embroiled with. And then, did you report it to the police? Even fewer people, right? Because that's the serious issue that must be addressed, right? So it's not saying that more prosecutors are taking bribes. It's saying there are more attempts to bribe prosecutors than we've been aware of in the past, and we need to take serious steps to ensure and secure the integrity of prosecutors. So we have to be bold. Yeah, again, another one of my disruptive suggestions. You have to have regular integrity testing of prosecutors, not because prosecutors are more likely to be corrupt than people not, because they are in an institution where chances are high that they will be subjected to that.
Would that include lifestyle audit
Absolutely.
as a compulsory element?
Absolutely. But, I don't know exactly what people mean when they say lifestyle audit. What I mean is that when prosecutors do a financial disclosure and they disclose all their interests, right, and there are red flags that emerge, either they have way more money than a prosecutor's salary can justify, there needs to be a basic investigation. And if there are credible answers, that's fine. The minister is talking about unexplained wealth orders that we can apply in situations where the disclosure and the tax declarations and the actual de facto income don't match up. Maybe we should have a 50. We need consequences all over the place, right? And we need strategies all over the place to keep ourselves honest. And it's not a reflection on the people who work there. It's a reflection on how easy it is to target that institution.
Thank you. I think the lifestyle must mean where we go into the accounts, not voluntarily. We go and assess their lifestyle, their assets, their families, because other assets are hidden under other people's names. That's what we must do. That's what I've called for in the NPA. Mfundisi.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Good afternoon, Advocate.
Apologies, I had said that she's next.
Okay.
I jumped. I think we take, yeah. She wanted to come in on the same. My apologies, Mfundisi.
Okay, no, thank you, Chair. Advocate Kronje, I really feel you on some of the things you're raising. So you talk about, as part of your vision, the need to focus on performance in terms of planning, monitoring, reporting, and accountability systems. You talk about the risks around ethical conduct and integrity systems. You talk passionately, and I think rightly so, about the skills issues. I hear the hyperbole in your voice, but I think I associate it with passion and hunger for movement, right? You're looking to come back to an institution that you left because you were frustrated by a sense that there was a tendency for people to bury their heads in the sand. I think that those were your words. You narrate a story about significant pushback, because it's easy for people to focus on a fight between two people, but actually it sounds like there was a system that you were struggling with. You reflect on what you observe when the NPA goes to report through the normal accountability processes into Parliament and etc. A sense that the attention to these very things that you remain concerned about is not quite there. Which says that the tendency to bury heads in the sand continues. So the very thing that frustrated you, what's your sense about how you would deal with it this time around?
So as I said, what I found most difficult in the NPA the last time round is this sense in the NPA that we are actually fine. It's people out there who don't understand, right? They don't understand how things work and how it's not our fault and how it's many other challenges in the system. and not all, many of those are real. I'm not diminishing them. There are real issues that affect the performance of the NPA. But I don't think that it's possible any longer for people in the NPA, and I ran into some at the hotel last night saying to me that, I said what frustrated me back in the day is that people would not acknowledge the reality. And they were saying, no, I don't know what NPA you're talking about, because people now realize every day they read the newspapers, they get confronted at braais, they live in this country, and there's no hiding from the fact that there are challenges with the NPA's performance. But the NPA is also very hierarchical, and the tone is set at the top. So I'm here for this job, because I think with this job, you can change the culture, you can change the tone, not alone, right? So the thing I learn every time I leave is I need to build more allies, and I need to, get more of a groundswell of people to support the agenda that I feel so passionately about. I do think it's going to be a challenge when you can't fire anybody, you can't. Your hands are so tied at the leadership level to disincentivize people who are not willing to make the changes that are needed. So, I heard that the minister asks about management experience, and I think that it's collective management experience that's needed and collective action to address the management. So it's the minister, the president, and the NDPP that need to take a long, hard look at how the system works and how we can bring in fresh blood. As far as I know, no deputies left in the NPA. So it's the NDPP who will go, and the DNDPPs. There aren't any of the 4 DNDPPs will be there next year. So says my intel in the NPA. I see the minister is declining to nod her head. But so there is going to be a round of...
You are indirectly asking me.
As I said, I have good intel in the institution, and so all 4 positions are up for grabs. Firstly, I think those 4 positions need to be re-engineered, because I don't think they speak to the functions of the NDPP in the NPA Act. And so I would certainly refocus the role that the head office plays in providing support to the DPPs. You can't find out after the fact in an Omotoso trial that the prosecutor declined to prosecute. They sat down for 9 days for cross-examination. It was finished in 2 hours. We only discover that at the acquittal stages, there should have been who was monitoring, who was managing, who was overseeing. And I think that's pretty systemic as well. These are examples of problems, but they're pretty systemic problems. The NDPP primary function is policy. It's setting policy and setting directives. I also look at the NPA Act, the annual report for what policy changes have there been. The world has changed dramatically since 2013, when I think we last changed our prosecution policy. Prosecutors need a lot more guidance and support. If you go online and you check the prosecution policy for the UK, Australia, the US, all these common law countries, you see guidance to prosecutors, extensive guidance, so that it's much easier when a prosecutor then deviates, either for a bribe or for just not being competent, to say there's been a deviation here. Why wasn't it picked up? So that role then, needs to be reinforced. The role of seeing that policy is being complied with. I heard the NDPP being grilled about, in either ad hoc committee or something else, about how do you find out about problematic prosecutions? and it's an interesting question because there aren't systems in the national office. At some point in the NPA, there was actually a little bit of an inspectorate at head office that went around and just assessed different offices for compliance with policy, for performance problems, for challenges, so that you can address them before they become a crisis or a catastrophe. You just, so you need mechanisms to monitor and manage, but I don't know, there are problems with managing those people. You have to use the instruments that are there, and those are instruments. I think that accountability is also about communicating about decisions you've taken and decisions not to prosecute that you have taken. And I think the NPA needs to become a lot more open about communicating what its strategy is. What is it trying to do in state capture cases? What is it trying to do in gender-based violence cases? The issue that has bedeviled the NPA management since the days of Bulelani Ngcuka is, do we prosecute each and every case that walks through the door, or do we select? Do we determine, articulate criteria that we're going to apply so that we end up having manageable roles, that prosecutors don't sit with hundreds of cases, none of them being prosecuted because they're just too many. So these are not easy decisions, and these are controversial decisions because people can reasonably disagree about approaches. But then you can't avoid having the discussion because you're going to get lots of disagreements and flack. You have to go and put the issues on the table, get the inputs, and then make a call, put your policy there, get taken to the courts and fought about, but, act.
I'm going to start managing the time now, and I'm sure even the candidate proceed.
Thank you so much, Minister. A lot of things what I want to ask has already been asked, but what is important, when you say that there are some people that are with and some people are against, which then says to me that within the NPA there is two sides and so on, or two camps or whatever we want to call it. But would you, if in the event that you may be selected, in the event that you are selected, how would you change, what kind of change would you bring? Because there are interpersonal skills that are there. Mm-hmm. There are people with human beings who are going to, you have your systems that you can change, you've got your mechanisms and all other things that you can have, but you are going to work with people. And if people are in two camps, or even for trying to implementation will come and bring a stability amongst those that you're working with. And will you, for example, find a process or a way of saying, I'm back here, I'm just hypothetically speaking, I'm back here, let's work together. How do we work together? What can we do? And where can we do in order to make the organization a success? And will that be the order of the day? And thank you so much for your input. Yeah. But I'm just worried about getting in there, and there are two camps. How do you bring them together?
Thank you. So this happened when we arrived in the NPA in 2019, that there was lots of talk in the public domain that the NPA had been captured. So the assumption is there's some captured people and some uncaptured people. So how do we proceed? And there too, I think, SARS had the same situation. And I think the example of SARS is instructive, right? What you need at leadership level is to be very clear, as I said, within the limits of being able to hire and fire, which is really problematic. You need to, as a leader, articulate what behavior was acceptable and what behavior was not acceptable. As much detail as you possibly can. I'm all for celebrating the behavior that we want to see amongst prosecutors. And there are prosecutors who exemplify that behavior, and that should be celebrated. And I think that organizations, people very much go with the flow, right? And if you change the flow, people will, by and large, adapt. And of course, you need hand-holding and change management and all those good things. But I think you need to articulate a clear vision. People appreciate clarity above probably most other things. They want to know where you're going and how do I fit into this? And will there be space for me to give input or disagree with the direction that you're taking us? And that is my style, but I think that if you can't deal with the 20% or so who are not with you, whether they have vested interests for not being with you or whatever the reason is, right? Well, if there are legitimate reasons that they're not with you, you give them space to articulate them and you try and address them. But so I don't think it's a question of, are there two camps? Are there people who are for you or for the NDPP, like the media portrayed it? There are mostly people in the NPA who are there to do the work that the NPA needs them to do. How they do it, they certainly will take their cue from leadership and adjust if the policies and processes and procedures are being shaken up. I am encouraged because now more than ever, there is a moment where people recognize we have got to do things differently. We cannot carry on in the same way. And I think that presents huge opportunity. There will be people who think there is nothing wrong with the way we are operating. And you can engage with those people, but the time must come when maybe you part ways and you write to the minister.
I'm taking the last, you still have, and then we're going to because we've got quite a lot of the segment in the comments that we need to go through. It's substantive issues that we must process. And I'm worried it's really exhausting the candidate to that extent. Proceed.
Does the candidate
I hope you're still fine.
I'm
Please
full.
do indicate if you're not.
You have to stop me, that's the issue.
Thanks,
Okay.
Minister. I think I agree with the candidate. I've noticed that given an opportunity, she can address us for the whole day. And I take no umbrage about that, Advocate Kranja. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I have very many questions since I listened to you. I got more worried than getting somewhere. You say to the country as it watches you today that 2010, 2011, the appointment process in the NPA takes a shape that says we are now taking over the NPA by appointing in capable people whose job is going to be about a narrative, not the NPA. Did I understand you correctly? Mm-hmm. And then those people get appointed, even with your objections. Mm-hmm. And you write every memo that you can probably draft to the head office, and you don't get any positive feedback because then the people who are appointed were from head office anyway. So you were complaining to the people who are appointed in the room. Mm-hmm. And you stayed, you then left in 2012, 2011, 2012 beginning. And then you come back in 2019. Those people that were appointed in 2010, 2011 are still there. They have not resigned, they have not retired, they were not too old to retire, neither were they dismissed or otherwise, right?
Most of them were on incapacity processes, yes.
They were still there in different capacities.
I mean, the ones that I knew about were not in those positions anymore.
Oh, okay.
But I assumed that there were others in other positions. I don't know.
Oh, okay. So you then rejoin the organization, and what did you do to try and repurpose, at least to the extent of your understanding of the road, if that's what we want to call it? How did you then try and find a corner where you're going to repurpose your role in the institution?
So the role I was appointed in was to start an organization from scratch. There was no investigating directorate. The Scorpions had been dismantled, but not only had the people in the Scorpions been sent into different, the investigators went to the police and the prosecutors were dispersed, and actually many also left the institution. But the intellectual, the organizational knowledge that had built up in the Scorpions, I kept looking for policies, for approaches that had been adopted, because we were essentially going to do many of the same things. I kept being referred to some office there that has many files, and I'm most welcome to go and dig around in there. But my job, therefore, was to start this capability from scratch, which, was not an easy thing to do in a public service that was already very constrained. I wasn't I didn't have the power to appoint people, so I had to go and beg, borrow, and steal people where I could to try and get them to work on something most of them considered career limiting, because they'd seen what happens to people when you try and take on senior political figures. So, I certainly, in the people that I recruited, have very high standards. And so I wanted to bring on board people who I thought had the skills. But I was a beggar, not a chooser. It's not like I was advertising and say, all comers, I'm going to pick. No. Literally, there were no volunteers to take on state capture cases. I had to go and entice people and beg them to come and do the work. I certainly had views on what should be happening in the rest of the NPA, but quite strictly, I had a lane, and I did have tendencies to stray out of my lane, which is why there was perceptions that there may have been head clashing, because I'm outspoken, I say what I think, and as you can see, it doesn't always go down well. So I certainly try to, at management meetings, give input, talk about skills audit, talk about fixing the situation with the LPC, talk about how we can build this capability, how do we have integrity systems, but none of that was my job. My job was get convictions in state capture cases.
Can I just check with you? You spoke very well about or at length rather, about the training for the NPA or for the prosecutors, as they are called. Mm-hmm. Have you ever taken the time to go through their current training manuals?
Absolutely.
Do you agree with them?
There's a syllabus for the aspirant prosecutor program. I found it on the internet, and I went through it. It needs a lot of work. I'm not sure that the LPC would certify it. I'd love to hear if the LPC would accredit that syllabus. But I really think we should try, right, to get the LPC to comment on what it thinks about the syllabus for aspirant prosecutors.
The reason I'm asking you that angle is because I find it a little worrying that you were in the system. We have seen you are a very senior person that comes out of that system, having been part of the first people who worked in the NPA, and then we're sitting with a program that produces people who must work in that system, and we are still talking about it 25 years later or so, and we are not saying this is how we have actually tried to influence the trajectory in order for us to improve our service offering in that space, because prosecutorial actions are about service offering to our people all over the country. How best the rule of law is actually then upheld by everyone. So I get very worried when the conversation starts there. I do sit in the LSSA, we talk about the training for lawyers and all that every other time. We may not have talked about the prosecution line, but I can give you guarantee that we discuss these things because we understand the quality we want to produce for the members of the public to have confidence in the legal system. Lastly, Minister, and I wanted to understand this from you, is it your view that even with hindsight, now that you left in 2022, is it still your view, or is it your view rather, now with hindsight, that that NPA that you left in 2011 still exists as perceptibly captured as you would have thought it could have been getting captured when people who were not capable were being appointed and so forth? Is it still your view?
So on the first question of what had I done within the NPA, so in fact, when I arrived in 2018, 2019, the Legal Practice Act debates were raging around in the country, and I was listening with interest the role of the NPA in that dispensation, because I thought that was the opportunity. I thought this was government's policy, that it was going to create this sort of uniformity of legal practitioners throughout and have clarity about whether prosecutors could move in and out of other parts of the legal profession. I wrote memos, I'm a prolific memo writer, about the importance of the NPA having a seat at the LPC table to advance its interest in getting quality training. And my colleagues were attending those meetings. It was not my area of responsibility, so I could give my views and I could give my input from the perspective of my experiences in trying to recruit people to do serious corruption cases. But ultimately, it was the leadership of the NPA that was deciding how to address those issues. So could I have done more? My focus was on trying to get corruption cases through the courts. And I kept being told that I must stay in my lane and focus on that. And that was fair. But I think more should have been done. As to what the situation is now, it's hard to tell what the situation is now. We need to have systems that can give us these answers. You know, are there competency assessments? What did the skills audit say? You know, what is the skill level of people in the NPA? On integrity issues, you know, there's been discussions in the media, you know, are there still people operating not in the interest of the organization? As I said earlier, it's inevitable that there will be attempts to capture the NPA because it makes important decisions that can impact on the lives of people. Whether they're succeeding or not, we need systems in place to give us an indication. I can only give you anecdotally what I think. I see prosecutors being arrested for taking bribes. That's shocking to me, you know. But they're in the newspapers.
As you said, I'm going to start managing your time.
It's in the public domain. So I think that I can't answer you about whether the NPA is still captured. I think that we need systems that should give us those answers.
Thanks, Advocate. Thanks.
You're done with your follow-up. I'm looking from your side, you're fine. Fine, Mfundisi, from your side. Okay. Just one question from my side. You spoke about the powers of the NDPP to make decisions, especially in relation to management. Let me speak to my mic as well. In relation to management. Now, changing the laws, we don't know whether we'll change the laws to give the NDPP powers to discipline the NPP. Wouldn't you run away if that doesn't happen? Because you're not going to have those powers.
Yes.
If we decide that you are the NDPP from 1st of February,
Yes.
those powers don't exist. Now, listening to the explanation earlier of being frustrated, writing memos, will you not leave after writing so many memos that are not responded to?
So, again, a very fair question. And the answer I'm going to give may not be very popular. I have no intention sticking around if there's no space for me to implement what I think needs to be implemented. I will work very hard to get the cooperation, and I think that there's a will and a willingness at the moment, and there's a moment for us to move on these issues. But I don't believe in sticking it out, especially in this kind of environment. Part of the reason I left in 2022 is it could have just been me, right, that was not getting the memo about how things were being done and what the vision is, and it just was me not getting in line with that vision. And when the NDPP and I agreed to part ways, it was expressly with the understanding that we are not aligned in our vision for how things should change. And I should make space for someone that she has more confidence is aligned with her vision. But as NDPP, the buck stops with me. And I have the authority and I have the responsibility to implement. I did not run away from the NPA the first time, but you know,
even in this case, you are NDPP, but the power to discipline your deputies will be with the president.
I think I would like to answer it like this in relation to another issue you raised about the ability to run your own budget and be your own accounting officer, right, as opposed to going to the Department of Justice. There are many things that can frustrate you in government, as I'm sure we all know. You know, there's bureaucracies that are often very disabling. The difference is, like on the issue of the budget and just the issue of independence generally. Personally, I don't think you get given independence, right? Independence is something you assert day in, day out in the decisions that you make. No one offers it to you. So by the same token, on the issue of the budget, you know, I think that if the NDPP articulates a vision for what needs to change, right, and is held accountable, goes to Parliament in the annual report, in meetings with the minister, articulates the vision. And the vision has a price tag, but everyone supports the vision, but not the price tag, right? Again, I think if the NDPP finds that government is undermining the NPA by not giving it the budget, you can be sure I am not going to be quiet about that. I exhaust all my options. So even when the last time I left, I took my issues everywhere. I took them to the minister, your predecessor. I sat down and said, these are the challenges. I took them to the president, and I said, these are the challenges. They asked for time, I gave them time, but in the end, I realized that it's difficult. The national director is the lead here, and she should be given the space to implement her vision, and I shouldn't be allowed to come here with my other vision that I want to implement. But I want to be transparent and frank with you. I have a vision, and I would like to have that vision implemented. if I find that government has no interest in implementing that, I'm not going to be here for 10 years battling the door down. But I certainly will give it my best efforts, and I will consult, I will work with people. I actually am not as hard to work with as the impression is created. Well, the media certainly has the profession that I don't make friends, and I'm not easy to get on with. But I certainly feel passionate. This institution I'm passionate about. There's no two ways about it. And lots of people know that once she gets started on this topic, it's hard to stop her. But I won't stick around if I don't feel that I'm still making a contribution that is valuable. I have skills, I can, apply them elsewhere, and I will go where I think I can make a better contribution. So I don't have an easy answer for you, but I can tell you that
No, thanks.
I'm not easily.
No, you did answer me before, because that's why I'm asking this question. You'd understand that the tenure of the previous NDPPs, they never finished their terms.
I think it's too long anyway. 10 years is
It's a long time, so we must.
And the
review it.
DPPs are there for life. I really
Yeah,
think
that's another issue.
we need to address that issue.
Let's hand over to Advocate Spanya Mokhale on the comments.
Sorry. Advocate Cronje, you actually got, 14 responses, and 9 were supporting responses, and 5 were objections. But when I went through them, I actually realized that even out of the 9 supporting responses, 3 of them had riders to say but. So I'll just go to the responses, and then you can respond to all of them in a group, because I saw you have, your responses were quite detailed. The first one says, I'll go straight in, I won't read the whole thing. She left after a blow up with Batohi. You have addressed that, you don't have to worry about it. And reportedly also did not make many friends in the institution. But the good thing about this is it was positive. The overall of it was positive, except for this part. If you could just explain the last part. And then a second objection actually came from a person and an organization, which was saying, we should ask you, if you are to be appointed as NDPP, how will you regain the trust of those experienced commercial prosecutors on whom the NPA and the country heavily depend to address corruption and serious commercial crimes? Please elaborate on the reasons for your resignation from the NPA as the then investigating director. I think that you have addressed. Okay, so we can skip that. And then a third objection says, it was reported that during her tenure, the ID had not successfully concluded any high-profile corruption cases. You have addressed that. If you could go straight to it, it would help, because I saw your response is quite detailed, and that's, I like that. It just closes it straight away. And then the last one was from somebody who is anonymous, and it said, have written futilely. I don't know what this, I suppose. Yeah,
I get the message.
You get the message, yes. To address Advocate Cronje in the past with shocking and factual repealing via email and WhatsApp communication. 6 attempts on my life when a direct writing was done to Advocate Cronje. Received nothing, as in 0 responses. My state capture case at the Zondo Commission should have been referred to IDEC for investigation, but it mysteriously disappeared. I suppose it was not, so you don't have to respond to that because it's about Zondo. But the 6, the ongoing writing and no responses. Unfortunately, this is anonymous.
Yes,
Yeah.
which makes it almost impossible to address, because the person says they wrote to me repeatedly. I'm not able to check, is that the case, what responses were given. So I wasn't able to address that.
Yes, no,
Because
I
it's
agree with
anonymous,
you, but
yeah.
I just had to
Raise it.
to mention it. And then the other one is from a firm of attorneys that says respectful submission that Advocate Cronier's actions on the allegations, which she had to deal with contraventions. This is in relation to the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fishery matter that involved the DG and other people.
I did not get that.
You did not get that?
No.
Okay. Yeah, PCC 2, yeah. Where
Didn't we send that? I'm looking at that.
So the,
Yeah, I saw in the
a matter involving the Department of Agriculture,
Forestry and Fishery.
Where?
I think it was Western Cape or something, I'm not sure. You
Yes.
remember it? Okay.
Well,
You
it's
know
my
of
favorite
it.
famous case.
Okay,
yes.
all right, yeah. The allegations say there was contravention of section 1794 of the Constitution regarding independence, section 195 of the Constitution regarding ethical public administration, section 32 of the NPA Act, which prohibits interference, section 41(6) of the NPA Act regarding the disclosure of information and or documents in possession of the NPA, and the NPA Code of Conduct. It is respectfully requested that these matters be fully considered in relation to Advocate Cronier's appointment, and we confirm our availability to clarify any aspects hereof or to provide supporting documentation. The supporting documentation has been provided. It's quite a thick one. Annexure PCC 2. Yeah. And
It's not anonymous, so
yeah, no,
the-
this is
the
not
date-
anonymous.
the
yes.
identity of the complainant
Yeah,
can
you
be
will
revealed.
get to know. And the last one was basically a support, but like I said, with a but, a group of individuals and an organization saying one of the potentially good and better candidates on the short list. She has worked in the NPA for a number of years before in different capacities and has distinguished herself in the role that she has previously held. She has experience in asset recovery and financial crimes. It is not clear if she has staying power, which has been all of the concerns that were raised, where people were saying staying power, and will not resign if she is under pressure, like she did as the inaugural director of IDEC. Investigate. Okay. I should indicate the names. Or for all of them, Minister? Oh. Oh, okay. All right. Oopsie, sorry. The first one was from the Daily Maverick about the blow up.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the second one about how will you ensure that trust is regained and all those people who had experience to prosecute commercial corruption cases was from chairperson of the SSAPSA. I think it's something Prosecutors of South Africa. It's the organization, I just forget the name. Society of State Advocates and Prosecutors of South Africa. So you have allies there already. They're saying we were there, we know what we were doing. How are you going to ensure that we continue or we get back? PCC 1 is our attachment.
Okay.
And then the third objection is that one that was anonymous after several attempts. And then the fourth one about the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, which is PCC 2, comes from B. Kulu and Partners Incorporated, a law firm. And then the last one is Mr. Pila Sitole and Dr. Ntokozo Lwandle and TEASA Marketplace Commission. That was raising issue of staying power. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you very much. So we agreed that you have an anonymous complaint that I wasn't able to address. I think that's the main one that I couldn't address. This one, I hadn't received any of these documents, but I know this matter very well. The complainant is Barnabas Kulu and partners. This case has in fact been with me my entire career. It was one of the first asset forfeiture cases I did that involved over-harvesting of West Coast and South Coast rock lobster in the Western Cape. Benjes and Hout Bay Fishing was the company that were over-harvesting. I think we brought asset forfeiture applications to seize 3 vessels. Then Mr. Benjes fled to the United States, and again we worked with the US authorities. Eventually the Scorpions settled this prosecution, and as part of the settlement, we settled the asset forfeiture. I think it was the biggest asset forfeiture settlement at that point, and it was for 20 million, which is now considered a laughable amount of money. But Mr. Benjes went to the United States and was apprehended over there. And we proceeded to provide assistance because in the US, the Department of Fisheries became a victim. And we were allowed to make a victim impact statement in the US proceedings to illustrate what the decimation of our West Coast and South Coast rock lobster resource did, so what impact it had. So we had gotten, I think, ECT to do studies to quantify the value of the damages Mr. Benjes's activities caused. He was ordered to pay South Africa. I'm going off memory now, and at the best of time, my memory with numbers is not great. But about 21 million US dollars was the quantified damage that we were awarded. Mr. Benjes had also, the US authorities had located assets belonging to Mr. Benjes in a trust in Jersey. And we, with the US government, were trying to preserve those assets to get them back. Mr. Kulu and his law firm were appointed probably by the NPA, but also by the department, to recover this money. So it was a curious appointment because I was no longer in the NPA at this point. But in fact, I was briefed in a civil matter by the NPA where Mr. Benjes was suing the government of South Africa for the full 21 million because he said that he had already settled with us with the 20 million, and so therefore we weren't entitled to the full 21 million. He lost that case. Mr. Benjes lost that case, and he appealed all the way to the SCA, I think. But Mr. Benjes's role then was to, on his version, recover on behalf of the South African government the 21 million. Which, as I say, was curious because there were already orders in place that we were entitled to the money. But he and my former colleague, Knox Molele, traveled to Jersey and the United States and eventually concluded a settlement that said we would take 7 million, not the full 21 million. And when I returned to the NPA, this is a matter I then investigated because the settlement, nobody authorized the settlement. And, it's an issue I raised with the NDPP. There were investigations conducted into the conduct of various individuals. Mr. Kulu, I think, was at one point ordered to repay money that he had received into his personal trust account. So Mr. Kugler is not a neutral complainant. He was a target of investigations at one point. He has been ordered to pay back substantial amounts of money to the department, who ultimately sued him. And I think his appeals have also been concluded. So I'm not surprised he's not a fan, but I'm not sure that I can address any further. I haven't had time to read what his actual complaint was. He says, I didn't deal with that matter appropriately. I will actually agree with him, because there should have been prosecutions emanating from the matter, so it's a pity. So then on the other issues, so this about my popularity. One of the articles written about the split, my departure was that it was a cat fight, and I was deeply offended by that because it trivialized what I thought were important issues. And I wrote to the journalist and said, happens to be a man, and said, would you characterize a disagreement between two male colleagues in this way, refusing to actually deal with the substance of the issues raised and just characterizing it as these women can't get along. He said he didn't mean it like that. But I accept that there wasn't a lot in the public domain for people, so people make up their own speculations. But there wasn't a cat fight, because the NDPP and I actually left on fairly decent terms. I can disagree with people and still get on with them. Yeah. The people who said I did nothing while I was in the ID, I think one complainant said I didn't institute a single prosecution, so I clarified that that's incorrect. The bulk of a lot of the prosecutions that are ongoing were instituted by me. And I had a strategy that, I was advancing that, the Nolani case was an important, really important case, because there haven't been a lot of serious, until Jackie Salebi, there hadn't actually been this very serious, high-profile prosecution. John Block was the other one, and both of those were a good 10 years ago. So there's very little incentive for anyone to turn state witness, because you have a good chance that the case will just drag on forever. I'm just looking at you two to see if I'm being temperate enough in my language, right? But I'm sorry, I'm being unfair. I think that it is true that almost none, except, there was a bit of a vindication in Nolani, but the case has to be re-enrolled, so it's not really a finalized prosecution. But it was really important. When we enrolled that case, we got bail denied of one of the key accused in that matter. He was later identified as a key accused in the US prosecution. And, our strategy was that we were trying to do one quick case so that people realize that when we charge, we will prosecute and we will succeed. And so when we charge the next one, you realize that actually they mean business and they're likely to plea. None of these cases have concluded, which is why I spent the last year of my life trying to work out what are the systemic problems causing this kind of delays, and we've addressed those. I have referred here to a report done by the NPA after my departure that was submitted in Parliament that set out everything that I had done in the NPA, and it's available online if anyone wants to check it. It wasn't written by me, it was by the NPA who said this is what was achieved. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't good enough. And I could see that it wasn't going to change. And I don't think it has. I think we're still in the situation where we don't have a conviction. Well, we have 1 or 2 plea and sentence agreements with no jail time, but we don't have a conviction for a serious corruption case 3 years after I left.
Maybe just to come in, the mic. I do note that, as you said, the team didn't give you the documents, and I'll acknowledge that because I gave you out of my pack, but there's a memo that is written by Mr. Mulele to Mzinyati on the same case, the NDPP versus Arnold Morris Bennings. If you read that memo, it does give a different matter compared to what you have explained.
On it.
Yeah, this memo talks about, it actually says that the allegations were brought by Barnabas Tulu Incorporate. And they were actually the ones who assisted NPA to pick up these corruption issues. As I say, I don't know what happened between the team because they should have provided you with all these documents so that you are able to make a reflection. I wanted to put it so that it's not said because we were provided with all this information. And I don't want it to be created that we've deliberately put away a particular document and not process it here because we can be alleged to have done something wrong. Yeah, it's a bit of a difficulty because the team should have given you all these documents so that you can give. If somebody is objecting and saying, these are the documents that supports my objection, I was the complainant, I think, and all that. And as you say, you are responding from your knowledge of information, but not to having understood what the complaint is about. Yeah. And I was, because that's one of the things I picked up, that you should have not seen it because it's not on your responses.
Yes.
You did make responses on others, but you didn't. The other issue that, and which we should be able to go on record, I always like going on record some of these things as if it's, so that it doesn't tomorrow create as if we were hiding things. COSATU did support you, so it must go on record. But from a point of COSATU, yeah, signed by the parliamentary coordinator. So it would have been from understanding of the work in Parliament. That's what but I'm saying it must go on record that you've got that because it would be said that it's a political aligned, though it's a labor movement, but it's got alliance that could cause some unnecessary views that we should be able to go on. So yeah. You wanted to say something, Prof, on that?
I guess taking the cue from the chairperson, in the event there is a document that might have been missed, as a corrective measure, giving you that and a chance to respond so that as the panel, we have the same benefit as we have seen with the others. Thank you.
Oh. I would be delighted to respond to this. It's,
That's why I'm saying I do apologize because they should have made sure. They send the email, I don't know what would have happened.
I mean, the subject matter of the complaint was part of the charges that Knox Molele faced before he left the NPA. So it's, yeah, it's, he left the NPA, he reached a settlement with the NPA, but by then I had already left the NPA.
Also, he wrote a memo before. So
I assume so, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's
And
a
then
he-
later faced the charges in relation to this.
The
you don't
chart,
know.
he faced...
Let's give you a chance
yeah.
to read everything. I
Yes.
think let's be rather fair
Safe.
to you, Advocate
Yes.
Kurunya.
Yes.
Let's be fair to you. Look at the complaint of Barnabas. Look
Yes.
at it with all the documents that have been provided. Then you can give us an explanation.
I'll be happy to
so
do
that
that.
we have it as well on record. We don't want to prejudice you. Yeah, I must right. And
I'm
we
very
don't want
happy
to be seen as if we covering for you as well. So it's something that we've got to be quite cautious about from our side. With that, I'm happy to announce that we bring this session to an end with you. And thank you very much for coming through, sharing the views, and making yourself available.
I'm very grateful, and I'm sorry I seem to have exhausted the panel.
I don't think the panel, I didn't say them complaining, and if I didn't stop, I think the panel would have gone on and on with you in the conversation. As we say, it's a conversation.
Yes.
And you were open to have that conversation openly.
Yes.
So I think that's
Anytime.
what you did. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We haven't had lunch.